You're listening to Grain of Salt, a podcast hosted by Donnie Bertlis and Chris Seshu, covering the Buffalo Niagara region's food and drink scene. Today's episode features Victor Parra Gonzalez, the chef-owner of Jaguar at the Bistro in Youngstown, New York. Victor discusses his ups and downs of his culinary career, from growing up in Mexico, schooling and working in Montreal, the chaos of a casino kitchen, and finally the authentic Mexican fare that he's serving today in his restaurant.
I don't know anything about tequila.
When you come in.
I know I like tequila because I love it in every mixed drink I've had it in.
Yeah.
And I know like the good stuff you can just sip straight.
Yeah, we have like 14 and 3 mezcals at the restaurant. So 14 different choices.
Yeah.
And then we do 3 type of mezcals. So
I also want to get into mezcal.
it's, definitely like it's an acquired taste.
It's really smoky, right?
Yeah, like it's not for everybody. But if you like it, you get hooked on. That's for sure. So
is that like you're like if you're not working or whatever, you just sip a little mezcal at home or no?
No, because mezcal gets you high. Seriously, it does. There's like this like weedy part of mezcal that
it's like a little extra buzz.
Yeah, it just hits you right on the back of the head, and you're just like laughing constantly for no reason. And they used to say that before. Like when back in the ages, right? Like they used to say that it was because of the spirits it will come in and like sort of like guide you through this whole process.
Yeah.
No, the fucking real shit is that it's so strong that it disconnects you right away.
Wow.
Like if you're drinking something, almost like if you're drinking like really high quality booze. Yeah. And you start like shooting chartreuse. Have you ever felt that? Like how your body just sort of like just disconnects.
I do, yes.
Yeah, so that's like that. That's what happens with mezcal. The only reason is you're just gonna use one booze and that's fine. So.
Yeah, but that's pretty great. So you guys have a pretty big selection at the restaurant?
So we have like 14 of them, all sorts of like range, but we generally have what I know it's like middle to the top shelf. Yeah. So I certainly don't have anything like. We don't carry like Jose Cuervo per se.
Okay.
But like that was a little bit of this thing for me to just say, hey, it was part of separating the restaurant from every other Mexican restaurant that's available here.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
It was, when I came in, they had these huge amounts of bourbon and whiskey and they've been sitting there for ages because nobody really drank it. They just sort of like follow that trend.
Okay, yeah.
And there was no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
It was just like that. So we started making a better mix in the bar.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I slowly started gravitating towards the tequilas. Yeah. And we got a little bit more information about what products were available for our area. Yeah. And then from then on, we just went. One day, I walked in with like the delivery guys and told my server that one day you're staying tonight, we're going to like learn about these things. And we had like 14 tequilas. Her eyes were as big as like they could have been. And
that sounds like a pretty awesome our research and development process there.
I have to say for all that I put my girls through, they're troopers. They're troopers, bro. Because not only do they have to like learn every single stupidity that I try to do, but they have to learn like the Spanish words for them. Yeah. And then I generally like to give them a little bit of background of why we're doing the things that we're doing.
That's huge. I mean, you want your servers to essentially tell a story when they're describing the food.
And the other thing is like they had been in that property for so long.
Yeah. So they were with the previous
They were
ownership.
there, yeah. So the 3 that stayed, because the other just sort of left. They had been there for ages, and they were just pretty used to like very poor quality things. Yeah. And not to fault the previous owner. Just like what they had in there wasn't the best.
Yeah,
So they went from one day just doing your traditional turkey club to all of a sudden let's try to make scallops and caviar sort of day. And that was a funny one.
Yeah.
So
I mean it definitely looks like the menu you've made is definitely a unique, I guess, offering of the area. But so you were born in Mexico, correct?
yes, I was born in Acapulco, party town, 1950s, 1960s, like amazing town to be in. 2006 was the time to get the fuck out. It was, it's a beautiful place. Don't get me wrong. Acapulco is an amazing place. I love my town to death. I miss it every day. It's been a ton of years that I haven't been back.
You haven't been back in a while?
No. I sort of, my family, it's a pretty well-oriented family in terms of they could see a little bit towards the future of what was happening.
Okay.
So my father being a doctor and my mom being an entrepreneur, she didn't want me to stick around for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this restaurant for 25 years that she owned, and it was a hard way to sort of like chain me down to say, hey,
okay,
we don't want you to stick around here forever.
Okay.
And from a very, very young age, I started to like get kicked out all the time.
Like from the kitchen or whatever?
From everywhere. I think that it was meant to happen. No, my dad was very big into sports. And so he pushed me into sports a lot.
Yeah.
I, for 14 years, was a semi-professional swimmer.
Oh, okay.
And was on the road every 2 weeks of the month. So I was never home.
Yeah.
So I never really had that sense of like home feeling.
Yeah.
And at age 16, they decided that it was time for me to get the hell out of there. And it was pretty wild because I was supposed to go to France, but didn't make it. And it was too expensive.
Okay.
It was very, very expensive. And it was when I
was this for like school?
Yes. So I tried to pull a good one in my parents. I always went to bilingual schools, and from 13 to 16, I picked up French at we call it a French Alliance or French Alliance school.
Yeah. And
there I met this gentleman called Christophe, and he was the director of the school, and he had a background in hospitality.
Okay.
And they were doing a ton of things with the hospitality industry in Acapulco, big events.
Yeah, it's got to be a huge industry.
It was huge.
Yeah.
And he knew that that my family had a restaurant. And he said to me one day, he's like, we need some help to cater some stuff to you. Want to throw it down and help us? And I told him, I don't know how to cook. Like I was
you hung around the kitchen, but you didn't really pick it up?
No. My mom was pretty straightforward about that. She had this beautiful setup where the restaurant was huge. Now that I think of and reflect about it,
or compare it.
Yeah, so like we sat 200 people in that restaurant, and it was in the bottom level of our house. She had a central kitchen,
wow.
Open kitchen, and then 5 cooks.
Wow.
And then the 5 cooks were the 5 servers. So there was no servers.
Jeez.
So I believe it was more of the fact, like, get the hell out of the way. Just don't get in the middle.
Yeah.
Type of deal. But going back to this dude, he told me that, and I said, well, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So, I mean, I can carry plates if you want me to. I do that very well. And he did. He had me come in. I helped out. And it was the first glimpse I had to, like, upper scale service.
Okay.
Where all of a sudden I saw like servers really like getting together, putting down the pre-game or just the pre-shift, And they walked through this whole process. I saw the chef. He was French chef, very cool cat, just very laid back for what I later experienced in my life. But it was super cool.
So that was like your like your start of being interested in the industry world, or?
Well, I mean, I grew up on it. You know,
well, yeah, I mean, obviously you grew up, but maybe as like, a career for yourself.
Formally, like, yes, that was like the first thing. So that night I talked to the chef a little bit and I said, you know what, like, you guys are pretty cool back there. I mean, the front part didn't interest me at all.
Yeah.
I was doing that at the restaurant already. I was sort of like the runaround guy, bring the food to everybody.
It's way less cool than the back of the house.
Yes. So I talked to him, and then he talked to me about this place called Biarritz in France. And he was like, we have a school there, and I just visited, and we're offering scholarships to people who want to come over there. And I was like, so what do I got to do to get one of those? You know, like, this is how naive I was. I was like, so talk to me about this gig a little bit. The guy basically just said, pass a couple tests and get your visa and just find a way to survive up there. Yeah. And I was like, really? Like, that simple? Seemed very simple at the time. So
you were young.
Very young. I was 17 and I was about to be done with high school. So it was almost time for me to pick one of those things. So I did. I passed the test. I actually got to meet the French consul for Mexico. We sat down, talked to him, and gave me the visa. And then I went to my house and I told my parents, I said, hey, listen, if I can get a scholarship to go to France, would you guys let me go? And most importantly, would you guys support me to go?
Yeah.
My dad looked at me and he goes, so what is this about? And I told him, well, you know, like, I want to be a cook. I didn't say a cook. I said I want to be a chef. Obviously, everybody wants to be a chef. But,
yeah.
You know, and my dad looked at me with the biggest eyes of, like, shocked. He almost was certain that I was going to be a doctor.
Oh, okay.
And my mom looked at me and she immediately shook her head. Like, she's like, no. Like, no. And I was like, come on, you know, like, very simple. If I pass the test, if I can get my stuff, you guys support me. And they were like, you know, they talked a little bit. They did like their little like team huddle, talked about it because they were separated at the time. And,
that's a pretty big,
you know, like going from like Acapulco to like overseas to France.
As an 18-year-old.
Like. Yeah, you know, like, and by myself, you know, like that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So they figured, I think that in their minds was like, this dude is never going to get the scholarship, first of all. So what harm does it do to like tell him yes?
Yeah.
And haven't really asked my parents if that's what they thought, but one of the days I probably will.
Yeah.
And so they came back at me and they said, sure. So I pulled out my paperwork because I was already pretty organized by then. And I said, here you go. It's all in. I'm in. And my dad sort of like fell back a little bit and thought it for like 2-3 minutes, solid minutes. And then he looked at me, he goes, so do you really want to do this shit? And I was like, you know what? Yes, I really want to do this. I really want to go that way. And
damn.
And I just need pretty ridiculous amount of money. So I just really need like $60,000 to go, you know? And then my dad looked at me, he goes, I'm a doctor, I'm not fucking rich, you know? That's what he said. And sorry for the swearing, but that was pretty much his words. And then I told my dad, I said, listen, I just need a ticket. Just give me a ticket, get me there, and I'll get a job, and I'll be fine. And that was not the case. So we didn't get the ticket, obviously. And I talked to everybody in the school over there because they were expecting me, and I apologized. And it wasn't like a really good thing at the end. Like the drawback was really bad because they were only given these scholarships to a certain amount of people, and I had already taken one, and they were pretty pissed at me. So at the time, I didn't know what to do and felt really bad. And I had a friend who she was from Quebec, and she was studying in this school. She said, you know what, I'm going back home in Montreal, and we have culinary schools there. Yeah. You want to take a look over there?
Kind of French as well.
You know? And I said, well, you know what? Sure, why not? Didn't thought any of it. And 3 weeks later, I was getting shipped to go to Montreal.
Wow.
So I got there and went to this little school, very, very small school. which my mom recently just met. Like, actually, I took her for the first time after all these years, and she cried. She's, nice. You know, in her mind was like this huge, like, university. Yeah. Everybody goes to university, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when I went there, like, my commute from where I used to live to school was about an hour and a half every day.
Oh, geez.
So going one way, going the other way. And my first week was horrible. I did not understood the language. Nobody spoke French.
It's a weird French, right? It's Quebecois, right?
It's Quebecois.
Yeah.
So everybody was like talking this. Besides that, it was a weird mixture of ages when I went to school. A lot of older folks, a lot of younger folks, you know, mm-hmm. and the younger guys were talking the slang. The older folks were talking their Quebecois. So I was like in the middle, don't know shit. And I was the first immigrant in this school.
Oh, wow.
They've never taken anybody that was not from another country.
Yeah.
But the school had like great ratings. Chefs that were all from France. So at least I could understand them.
Yeah.
And they were retired guys from the real business that just came to Montreal to retire and sort of like get a little bit more of a relaxed life. And over there was where I really cut my teeth professionally. I worked for a bunch of places. Remember, my first gig was horrible. It was I didn't have enough money to support myself, so I talked to one of my peers there. His father had a restaurant that they ran, small restaurant. It was like a 50-seat restaurant, and JP was the cook, and his father was sort of like who directed the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he was going to culinary school to better the restaurant. That was his goal.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was getting a little more business, so it was too much for him to do it on his own. And I told him, I said, listen, if you give me a ride to your restaurant and you pay me a little bit, I'll help you after school.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, sure, why not? So
was this like your first like real experience?
This was my first
line,
this was my first gig. I was super ecstatic of making $8 an hour, man. To me, it was a ton.
Yeah.
Back in Mexico, you make $100 a week. So to think that I almost was making like $100 a day if I worked like a good amount of hours, that was a ton of money.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and especially it was not in the most legal way possible, sort of deal. So it was pretty good, it was a pretty good gig. And poor people that dined there, I swear, like it was bad. We will learn something at school just to get an idea how bad it was. Like in the morning, we would be learning something. At night, we were selling it.
Oh my God.
So we will like stop at the grocery store on our way down to the restaurant because we opened at 5.
With your notes from class.
So like we finished the school at 2. So it was a school from 6 to 2, which were the weirdest schedule.
Yeah, it's way too early for sure.
Way too early, But we had fish class at the first hour.
Yeah,
was the fish class, and it was the grossest thing that I could possibly imagine. Like nothing to wake up to, like the smell of fresh fish in your face. That's depends, It depends, but yeah. So we would stop at the grocery store, like the comparative of like a Tops per se.
Yeah.
Pick up shit, and he'll be calling the restaurant trying to get a sense of how many people were like reserved.
Yeah, yeah.
Because by this time we had learned that we had to cook just for the amount of people that we had. That's sort of like what we were told at the beginning. So he was trying to do the whole executive chef gig from his car and his cell phone, and some of the dishes were pretty terrible. To be quite honest.
Did you know that as you were putting them out, or did you guys think at the time like this is some
we
good
thought
stuff?
It was the coolest shit, man. Like honestly, we thought it was really cool because he went from like a really bad Italian fare because his parents were Italian to like now we're making, I remember the biggest dish that we made was a beef bourguignon, and that was like the biggest hit,
I mean, it's Montreal, like
so we got the chuck, everything, broke it down, do the whole 9 yards. We served that, and it was a really good hit. But
nice.
the first, like, I remember this well, and I will never forget it. We learned how to just properly cook rice, supposedly. And we decided to do a rice dish, charge $20 for it.
Wow.
And obviously, like no rice dish is worth $20. I don't care who you are. You can be serving Carolina Gold and Bichon Brock, and I still won't pay you like $20 for it.
Not for that ice cream or whatever he calls it.
Yeah, I don't know. But we did, and everybody just sort of like was looking at us because we had like this little window, that we could see the dining room, and they would get their dish and they will glance at us like, is this a joke or something? We put a fried egg on top of the rice, and we made it with like squid ink. And it was the most disgusting looking thing that we've ever put out.
Well, it's good to get those growing pains out early, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, so were you, after that, were you kind of just like going around in the other kitchens in Montreal, or did you kind of stick there?
There was a time that we realized, both of us, that like we were not learning anything. Like we were not pushing each other hard.
Yeah.
And my whole goal was, what set my fear was, they had this rule in school every 3 weeks they will do a test, and because there was so many people going through this program because it was free for them.
Yeah.
They had to like sort of trim off the fat very fast that they could afford it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember I did understand this very perfectly when they said it in Quebecois, was if you don't pass the test, you're out and you have to pay what you owe us.
Oh, geez.
So I was like, dude, I already paid the freaking tuition. Like I paid for the whole year because I didn't have any extra cash. Just wanted to make sure I got this stuff, And I told the staff, the staff over there, I said, hey, I can't get kicked out of school. And they all looked at me like I was really weird. Like, it happens all the time. What are you going to do? And I was like, no, like, you don't understand, dude. Like, there's no way for me to get kicked out of school. So, like, I need to pick this shit up. And the first time they gave me probably one of the most interesting piece of advice. My butchering mentor, which everybody got like a mentor, and that sort of setup. You got an advisory here, or advice, whatever you call it here, I don't know. But over there it was like a mentor type of thing. Yeah. He said, why don't you just get a job? Just get a real job, dude. And I was like, well, that's a little bit of a problem because can't really work legally. Yeah. He was like, all right. So he said, come to my house at 5. So I went to his house, called a couple of people. He was really good friends with a chef called Martin Picard. And pretty big guy. Yeah. Pretty powerful guy in Montreal. Really cool cat. And he got me a stash, and I went there, and I busted my balls for like the first day. Yeah. Messed it all up because I didn't understood like his food. Yeah. He was doing like deep rooted like Montreal food or Quebecois food. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I sort of felt that I had not nailed it, but I really needed the job really badly. So I went to his table. He didn't have an office at the time. Au Pied du Cochon was just starting to build. And I sat down on his table and I looked at him and I was like, listen, I'm going to be very honest. I need the job. Like, whatever you want me to do, man. You want me to clean the vegetables? I'll clean the vegetables. You want me to, like, wash the dishes? I'll wash the dishes. But I really need the gig. And he said, why don't you come back tomorrow, try it again, and see if, and we'll see. We'll talk about it later. So I came back the next day, and he wasn't there. So I was pretty pissed. But I did the whole gig, and his sous chef was there. And the sous chef was like, why don't you come back tomorrow? I was like, fuck, all right. 3 days in a row, like, let's do this. Yeah. So I came back tomorrow, and they gave me the whole detail of what I had to do. I got it done, and they gave me a piece of paper with the next hours. And I was like, but there was no, like, this is your job already. Yeah, right? Yeah. He was just like, come here to walk in and do this. So by the end of the week, like, they gave me my little envelope, and there was money in it, and I was pretty ecstatic. So that's how I started to work there. And about 3 months into it, he pulled me aside and he was like, you don't quite have this whole Montreal food type of like panned out.
Yeah.
It took me forever to really pick it up because never really had those flavors.
Oh yeah, it's a total different thing, especially compared to Mexico.
Yeah. So, and he was starting to get to this whole like nose to tail scenario.
Yeah.
All his skill set, crafted, whatever, they had like these hardcore guys who had been with him for years,
Yeah.
And he would walk in with these beautiful pigs and we have to break it down. And he didn't have time at the time to really like grab one person and hold him by the hand and do it.
Yeah.
So he suggested that I needed to get another job. And he was pretty cool about the whole idea. He said, go to talk to Herb Dumont, which was another dude. And I already talked to him about you. And go to the hotel. This might be best for you for now.
Yeah.
So that was the second thing I learned there was do right by one chef. They'll help you out.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
So I walked to this hotel and the guy was old school from Paris. He very rarely addressed anybody by name if he ever knew you.
Yeah.
I walked into his office, small office, and he sat me down, did an interview, and then he gave me a coat, and he was like, you're going to have to be here for a week before I even, like, talk to you about the job.
Nice.
And I was like, fuck, without pay. Like, it was like that moment where, like, I knew I had to put the work, but never really expected to have to do it that long.
Yeah.
And that really changed the way I looked at cooking afterwards because I passed a week and that worked a lot better for me.
Nice.
They had a much more organized system. The food was very comparable to what I was learning in school at the time.
Yeah.
And they had time to pair somebody to sort of like show me the ropes of the restaurants. They had 5 different restaurants. And one of the best parts about it was, like, I stayed there for a little bit and stayed there for 2 years, actually. And I became the chef de partie for the fine dining restaurant. And that was as high as you could get in their hierarchy,
Yeah.
Every kitchen is totally different. But if you were the chef de partie for a restaurant, it's like almost you were the sous chef. And the executive chef was right there,
Yeah.
And one of our roles was to feed the Canadiens of Montreal, which is the hockey team of Montreal.
Oh, shit.
And I picked up hockey as a very passionate thing. My crew, they were all like pretty hockey savvy guys.
Yeah.
They thought it was pretty fun to get back at the chef, to put him in the ice and tort him around.
Yeah.
And had to learn really quickly how to get out of their way because they were pretty brutal about it.
Does that mean that you're still a Canadiens fan?
No, you know what? I
mean, it's fine if you are.
No, I last time I watched the game was here at Sabres game, and I was pretty into it. But 2008, I had a big fallout with Canada. They kicked me out of the country and sort of like put hockey back aside. I was like,
you didn't like hockey out of spite for Canada.
Yes, pretty much. Like everybody talked about hockey over there, so I was like, screw you guys. No, my love with hockey was pretty cool. Got to meet some really cool people. Those fuckers eat a lot, I have to say.
Yeah,
they're like pretty bulky guys. I'm 5 foot nothing, and these guys are like 6 foot something, and they can put down like 30 pounds of food in one seat. So, I recently just watched another game here, and it was pretty cool. So I would say, despite the whole thing, I'm a Sabres fan, Buffalo Bills fan, definitely.
Nice. You've picked up well.
Yes.
So how did the getting kicked out thing happen? I mean, obviously you were working at these places kind of on the down low, essentially.
Yes, and I'm not. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not too proud. I should say it was very frustrating because 2006 to 2008 was a very hard time for Canada, immigration-wise.
I see.
To this day, I think there's still an application processing for one of my visas to work there. I just recently received some paperwork saying that I missed my court date or something like that. But it's pretty fun that, they wanted, especially with Mexico, they wanted people to come over and habitate. I don't even know if that's a word, but to inhabit Canada. Yeah. Because some of the places out there that are like still pretty deserted.
Yeah.
There's the ratio of people compared to the ratio of land.
Oh God, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So what happened was, for the Mexicans, which we have been known to do this for a long time, is for a few ones that broke the rules, we all had to pay the rule.
I see.
They started like going in on school visas, which you could get on the same day. If you go to Mexico City, you get a visa for each country that you need to go to.
I see.
So the easiest way it was to get a school visa. And then by then, you will live in Canada for a certain amount of years. And then you can just sort of like say, hey, listen, I've been living here for a while. Can I just stay? Yeah. And they're pretty cool about it as long as you're a contributing member to society, right? Made sense to me at that point. But I did my application and I was going to school. And because I was going to school, I had what was called a school permission to work. Okay. So as long as I remained in school, I was able to work, apparently. But they tweaked the rule while I was going there. They sort of decided that you couldn't do that any longer. So I ran afoul there because I was already working that way. And since I was working very close to the immigration office at the hotel, one day a guy walked in and he sort of did this whole like running joke, like, hey, let me see your green card sort of deal. Mm-hmm. And I freaked out. I didn't have one. So I ran back inside my kitchen and called my boss on the phone, and he walked like really quickly up. You had to take like 3 elevators to get to the restaurant. And they seemed to be like the longest elevator rides ever for me. Yeah. Because I had this dude standing right next to me. And the guy was pretty cool about it. He didn't make a big deal about it. He didn't make nothing went on the records. He just said, you know what? We just took the rule. So unfortunately, unless they sponsor you, you can't continue to work. So I turned around immediately, looked at my boss, and I said, hey, what do you think about that? Like, can you guys do that? And he looked at me and said, come to my office later. So finished my night. I walked down to his office, and he had all sorts of paperwork that basically a bunch of legal stuff that said that they were not going to do it. So I had to sign them all. For their...
That had to suck.
Yeah, for their, benefit. Yeah. And that was about that part of the gig for me in there. I went back to talk to Martin a little bit, and I asked him if he would do it. Mm-hmm. I said, listen, I know I was doing back and forward jobs between that hotel and Martin's restaurant. Yeah. And I said, well, if you really like what I'm doing, do you feel like you will be able to? I pay all the fees, but just help me out. And he had a pretty full crew. He sort of took me back as a I feel bad for you type of deal. Yeah. I kicked you out in the first place. So, he said no. And
so what were you thinking? What were you thinking at that point?
I was pretty pissed off. I was pretty mad because I had been there for quite a while now. Yeah. And
had you finished school at this
point?
Yes.
School was done. So there was no way for me to really remain there.
Yeah, yeah. You couldn't take one class or something.
Yeah, no, there was no. I mean, I think at some point my father just said what would it take? And I said, I don't know, just drop another $60,000, and I called my parents and I told them what had happened, and they were devastated. They were pretty sad because obviously Mexico wasn't getting any better. Pretty sure everybody hears that every other time.
I think that's
so. Yeah. I told them they had given me about a month to get back, And at that point, I sort of had like this really weird mentality of, you know what, screw you. If you don't really want me here, well, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And I didn't thought anything of it. I felt that I was 21 and I had already been working at such a higher levels that I said, well, screw it. I'm going to go back home and somebody's going to want to hire me and I'll do all right. You know?
Yeah.
I got home and there was no jobs anywhere. Like nobody wanted a Mexican guy with a fancy title that they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And Acapulco wasn't really picking up either.
Yeah.
So I started going back and forward between many places.
Okay.
Just picked up a bag and picked up my knives and just sort of trottled around for a little bit, asking for places to get to work.
Like through Mexico? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that landed me into some really quirky places, like really weird places. But it also showed me that like schooling wasn't really as important if you really didn't keep yourself sharp,
Okay.
Most
like you feel like the experience you got in the restaurants were maybe
definitely
more important than
well, I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's something to be said for school. I feel now, for example, guys get out of school and they all want to be chefs,
They think it's a very short path to becoming a chef.
I don't ever hear a guy come by and say, dude, I want to be a cook.
Yeah.
And I've asked around enough the guys who are working their asses off here.
Yeah.
And they all, when you meet them, they're like, hey, I'm a cook. Hey, I'm a cook. Hey, I'm a cook.
Yeah, there's very few chefs, which is weird to say, in Buffalo who refer to themselves as chef.
Yeah.
There's maybe like a handful. I think like everyone refers to Mike Andrzejewski as chef.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like a given. Like you kind of have to. I think that like I don't want to say older generation, but the guys who set the foundation.
Yes.
There's a certain respect. But yeah, you talk to like James Roberts or Steve Gedra or Ed Forrester and Bruce Wysela. Like all those guys, I don't think they would ever really go by that.
No, and like that's one of the parts that I realized very early was when I first moved here, how different it was.
Yeah.
I came here again through school. My mother had relocated here. She had remarried, and she was in the Falls. And
okay.
I had been doing this whole like traveling around in Mexico for a year, and I was getting pretty old because I had nowhere to stay. So that's one of the things that I always tell the cooks that come into my kitchen. They say, well, it's too far. And I said, dude, nothing is too far.
Yeah.
If you really want to do something, you're going to go any sort of length possible to do it.
Yeah.
And when my mom came here, we found out that she had cancer. So she's pretty good now, thank God. Like she's in remission. But
that's great news.
My stepfather called me and he said, I know you're trying to do your stuff down there, but you probably want to get here as soon as possible. And I told him, you know what? Yes, this whole thing is not paying out.
Yeah.
And I had enough money from Canada that I had saved by working that I wasn't in a difficult position. So I said to myself, I'm going to take like 6 months and I'm going to go to visit my mom and see what happens. So I moved in here and she wasn't doing that great.
Yeah.
So the working thing got put on hold for a while. Dedicated myself to just helping them out as much as I possibly could.
Of course.
And finally, in one of those going back and forth between Roswell and my house, my stepdad decided to take me to the casino. He was like, let's just go. Let's just get one night where we don't have to. Yeah, we don't have to worry about anything, And my mom was like, you need to go. You need to just get out of the house and just do something. So we went there and we had dinner at the steakhouse. And he could see it in my face that, like, I was still very much in love with cooking, I looked
just looking around, or
yeah, I mean, the steakhouse was like, to me, very comparable to the restaurant that I had run in Canada.
Okay.
So same setup where you see the people that are making the food. Not to say that the steakhouse is the greatest thing, but
yeah, not the quality, but the whole vibe.
The whole vibe, you know.
Yeah.
And he said, "Why don't you just talk to somebody and see if they have a job here?" And I sort of laughed at that point, and I said, "I've been out of the kitchen, a professional kitchen, like this for a year and a half, so my chops were not anywhere near in tune." And then he said, "Sure, like seriously, talk to somebody."
Yeah.
So I went over there and I looked at the chef, and I sort of like waved him over, which was pretty rude at that time, I believe. He came over with his face, Joe, at the time, like we met afterwards, and Joe fired. And he sort of like listened to me for my first like 5 set of words, and then he turned around and the kitchen was like crashing. So he sort of like, yeah, dude, whatever, waved me off, and I was on my way out.
Yeah.
And I told my stepdad, I said, well, why don't I just like get an application here?
Yeah.
Didn't know how this whole thing worked out. I thought I stepped to the booth, get a piece of paper, and fill that up. It wasn't that easy, I suppose. So they looked at me really weird, and they made me come back. I did the whole paperwork, and I landed a job there through a friend that she sort of got me a job, and I started cooking there. And the first week was really hilarious because
was it a lot of like learning how to ride a bike again type of thing, or?
Yeah, it was. It was pretty funny because the executive chef at the time was Canadian, and he sort of like took really well to me in the interview process. He had been also a good friend of a bunch of chefs that I knew of over there, and they decided that the best fit for me was to start in the steakhouse as a cook.
Nice.
So I originally wanted to land the sous chef gig there, but to this day, I think Andy Berger, which is now at C-Bar, laughs about this because he was the sous chef there.
Nice.
And I very profoundly just said, "Hey, I won that gig," and he was there in the interview. He looked at me and he laughed, and.
Nice.
Yeah. So, like, for the first week was horrible because they were super short staff, and I think that's where I got my desire to never do that to my guys. They ran a restaurant that does 350 covers a night with 4 people.
That's a ridiculous amount of people.
And especially when they're charging like $75 a pop for steak. I think that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's kind of one of those things though where you learn so much by being in those situations, I guess. Like it really, I mean, also it will reinforce your life decisions.
Yes.
Like if you can make it through these, you're like, no, I really do want to do this because that was horrible, but I still want to do it.
Yeah, no, I still say that night, we have a memorable night with Andy and I. Saturday night, my second week, he was working the saute station because they were that short-handed. And he looked at me and he said, well, you're on your own, bro. You're on Hot Apps. And Hot Apps was everything that nobody else wanted to do. Pretty much. That's what they had allocated to Hot Apps. And I didn't even know the menu that well. And we did 422 covers that night. And I felt that I had just gotten kicked my balls out. And I remember him looking over every 10 minutes as the machine just went like... And it was just like this ego thing that I'm like... By then, I had already understand that he was the sous chef and that I had pretty much like said, I'm coming after your job.
Yeah.
And like, I wanted to prove him that I didn't say that lightly. I didn't mean any bad sort of like realm out of it. And I held my own pretty proudly. almost finished puking the night because didn't want it to get fired on my first Saturday night by myself. And then that was it. After that, it was pretty funny. After that, he decided to move on. 2 months later, I took the gig, and I stayed at the steakhouse for a good 8 months.
Yeah.
And then the whole pilgrimage started. They put me into every one of the restaurants.
Which is, I mean, that's kind of good, I guess, right? To get a little well-rounded.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
That part of my job was pretty good. What wasn't pretty good was that it almost seemed that every time that I got switched, the staff got pulled away. So every restaurant I ever had to run there was taken away from cooks.
Yeah.
And I always had this idea that no matter what, I'm going to get through it. Mm-hmm. We do it in my restaurant now. We were talking earlier about the Phantom Crew. But, it was a really good learning experience, which served me a lot for what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
I mean, we have an intro, but you run and own Jaguar at the Bistro.
Yes.
Up in Youngstown. That was I want to say November of 2013. Did I read?
Yes.
Okay.
So November 1st was the official first day that we walked in with a lot of hopes.
Yeah.
I think that everybody that walks into a brand new place has a lot of dreams and hopes and aspirations.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I was pretty determined because my last gig had been horrible. Sort of like the tone of my life, I suppose. My sister and I, which she's my sous chef, she was out of a job, and she was pretty bummed about the whole idea that she had been looking for a job for a while.
Yeah.
She couldn't get any.
Also in the restaurant industry? Or,
no, she actually...
Normal civilian?
She's a framer. She went to BOCES for framing and building and trades. And amazing girl with, building shit. She is, the MacGyver of the kitchen, I will say.
I would say that's a pretty good skill to have on hand when you're building a new restaurant or
I have owed her so much to that little kid. She's younger than me, but she's just pretty resourceful, I have to say.
Nice.
So she was pretty bummed out about that, and she also grew up in the restaurant. She was part of that sort of trade. And one day we were walking around with a friend of mine in Youngstown, and this dude took me to the diner of the village, which is an amazing place for the most delicious Reuben ever. That's what I get all the time.
Nice.
And he sort of questioned me, pushed me really, really hard. He was like, you're pretty miserable, and you seem like you're losing your passion for cooking, and you need to get the fuck out of that place.
Yeah.
And I told him, sure, you're right, but, there's nowhere to go. I had no idea where to go. So we walked a little bit past the whole scenario, and we looked at this place, and he goes, wouldn't you love to have this place? And I said, you know what? Yes, that would be cool, but didn't thought any of it at the time. And I wanted to get into the more formal, really fun dining experience. Yeah. And I think Mike A's was just opening at the time.
Yes, this is 2002-ish or 2012-ish.
12-ish.
Yeah.
And I told my friend, I said, you know what, I'm going to get a job there. I said, I'm going to do it. And I went to do stash very poorly. Had to run out in the middle of the stash. Family emergency.
Oh, jeez.
So I remembered, and that's one of the reasons why I went to do that taco pop-up with Ed that we can talk about. But I walked in, and Scott Crombie was the sous chef there.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, hey, this is my resume, and I remember them looking at me like, this dude's from the casino, so the fuck does he know? And sure as hell, I confirmed that half the night when I said, hey, chef, I sort of had to go. So that did not work there. And I talked to my friend again. We opened the buffet after that whole year of planning and constructing and building. And I had the opportunity to run it afterwards by myself with 5 other amazing dudes. And my whole deal was desperate to get back into cooking. I was not cooking. I was not behind the line. We talked a little bit about my age. I'm 26. I really wanted to be burning my hands every night. Yeah. So we, my sister and I started looking for places. First, we thought we'd do something really small. Like, we thought we'd do like a 30-seat restaurant and just be me and her cooking. She's never had any formal training, but I figured if we can make no complicated food, just take her by the hand, we can get there. Yeah. And she brought up to me one day the picture of that restaurant, and she said, like, dude, it's on the line. Like, do you want to go talk about it? So we went, met the owner. He's the nicest guy ever. He said to me, if you sort of like did like a minute interview, like, what are your skill sets? Like, obviously, I believe that every owner doesn't want to just say they work so hard for what they've done. Yeah. They want to make sure that whoever gets it is not going to fuck it up on the first night. Yeah. So we sort of like passed that interview, and we took over November 1st. And November 13th, we set up our first menu change, which was like a week after, like 2 weeks after. That was pretty fun.
So were you like, are you talking like menu change, like a whole new menu?
A whole new menu.
Are you talking like, so like when you first opened, were you still doing some of the old stuff?
No. Okay. So when I first opened, I had this menu that had like, it was me getting back behind the stove sort of deal. Yeah. And I was pretty anxious to cook some really amazing things that I thought were like the greatest shit ever. So we had this menu with like 15 entrees, like 5 appetizers, and three different salads. And my first week, like, nobody came. I was open like there was nobody, and all the food was there. And so I remember the girls, like, just, and I call them the girls because we're very close. Like I said, there's a small amount of servers there. The girls would walk into the kitchen and they would look at me, and now they feel with the confidence of like just shooting this shit all the time in a more relaxed way. But at the time it was like, oh, this dude like doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he just pretty much dried out this place. Yeah. Chicken and biscuits was a big hit back in the day before we took it over. Meatloaf, and all of a sudden I was serving like this $42 ribeye, 32 days, like 21 days dry age. And I had this menu style of like a very exciting steakhouse, I remember. Yeah. And
did you also have the Mexican influence on it yet, or not? Not really?
Yet. No. Okay. I felt that if I was going to do it, because here's what happened. The hype was, here comes this dude from Mexico. The word spread out pretty quickly through town that I was going to take over the restaurant, and everybody was saying that, oh no, here's going to transform it into this mighty taco thing. Yeah, yeah. I was pretty pissed, because that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, yeah. So that pushed me back to what I had originally planned. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do the best thing I can possibly do to convince you that we also know how to cook something else. Yeah. So we did a lot of seafood in the restaurant in the first stages of the... I felt very comfortable with seafood. I've always had like that passion with seafood. And I remember like 3 months into it, this Andrew Galarno guy walked in, and I say guy because I was very unknowledgeable of who he was, and I feel so ashamed.
So he walked in, you had no idea who it was?
No, absolutely no. That's not how it happened. Sorry. The Sunday night, we had been dry for like 2 weeks. Nobody had come to the restaurant. And this is like 3 months in, and this gentleman walks in, and he has like a tent top with him at 9:45 at night. And, like when you're open for the first months, it doesn't matter to you if it's like 10 or 11. It's something walks through the door.
Oh, yeah.
You take it.
Yeah.
And I have Jess, which she's the front of the house, like counterpart of mine. She leads the girls in the right direction. And I would say her title goes from like, let's make it happen to front of the house, like manager sort of deal.
Yeah, yeah.
She looked at me and she goes, you know what, dude? I have nothing else to do. Let's fucking do this table.
Yeah.
I said, sure. And I cooked my ass out for these people. And at the end of the night, the guy came to the back, and he said, I don't normally do this, but I'm from the Buffalo News. We just tasted your food, and it was pretty good, Yeah. And I said, well, thank you very much. And I didn't thought any of it.
Yeah.
I went home, and like 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, shit. It hit me. At the time, like, it was like, it hit me. I just got reviewed. And I was so scared because it literally was one guy in the kitchen and one server for 10 people.
Yeah.
And they order pretty much everything on the menu. So I had to cook everything on the menu by myself. I don't care who you are. You can be the best fucking guy in the world behind on the line. But when you do a menu that was so complicated like mine, out of a stupidity of myself,
yeah,
where literally I should have had like 3 or 4 guys in the line with me,
yeah,
to do it, and for him to just say it was decent, that was pretty cool. So it turned out that he was just sort of like feeling the waters for Mr. Galarno. And I believe, if I don't mistake, that he came in afterwards. And I think that's how this thing happened.
Yeah, because I think the review he posted was in May.
Yeah.
Of last year, rather.
Yeah. So after that, I was pretty scared because like I had sunk my whole livelihood into this place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like pretty scared shitless. My sister had no formal training, and I took on Tommy, which he's, I will say, my right-hand guy. Nice. Irish kid that makes the best tortillas ever. I sort of like had this boot camp training with them.
Yeah.
I literally said, I'm only as good as you guys are. So let's get this toned down. Let's get it done. And we went from doing no menu changes for the first 3 months to literally changing the menu every month and a half so that they could learn.
Yeah.
I found that was the best way for me to, in an affordable way, do it.
Yeah.
Which I feel so bad for my customers that they had to pay for the training on my cooks. But it happens, it's a reality. It does happen. And if I can count correctly, we've done 12 different menus to date.
Nice.
Which is a lot.
What have you seen, like, if you could see, like, a theme that has changed over time? Like, where do you feel you are at now with the menu?
Now I am to the point where we wanted to be at the beginning. We are serving Mexican food in a much more refined fashion.
Okay. Which I mean, literally no one has seen in Western New York, like, ever. Like, we have Mighty Taco, which is god awful, and we have I can't. Yes. Have you had Mighty Taco?
No.
I almost kind of want to like videotape you trying to just to like
just
watch
to like see what happens.
Just to like maybe see like a tear like come down your eye.
My best friend, which is amazing kid from Germany. He's like my best friend. He lives out in Seattle. He told me once that if I wanted to get a girlfriend here, I needed to take the girl to Mighty Taco and everything was going to happen. Like, apparently Mighty Taco has like this magic sort of scenario.
I don't know what that he's talking about.
But he swore by that thing, so I said I'm never gonna eat that.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
But besides that, I mean, a lot of the other Mexican is pretty much down the middle of the road, and I don't know, a lot of it's not that great.
Yeah.
We finally have this really cool place in South Buffalo, but it's more
Mexico.
Yeah, but it's more like street
the family
foodish.
of Valle de Mexico are the nicest people in the world.
Have you been?
Yes, I remember we met them. I was out buying stuff in the market, and the name of the daughter escapes to me for the life of me. But it was after the first time that somebody had come to the restaurant and posted a picture of me and my sister in whatever part of the magazine was.
Yeah.
She came in and tapped me on the shoulder, and then she was like, "Chef, and I want to remember her name for the life of me, but she said, we have this little place in the South Buffalo, and literally we look up to what you're doing." And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not doing anything different. Like, to me, this type of food is what I grew up eating.
Okay.
Like, my mom being a chef cooked this type of food for us for dinner. And I remember that resonated really, really hardcore with me when she said that. And
nice.
And sort of has been a very slow process to get to this point finally, where about 2 weeks ago, I finally said, I'm done cooking for everybody who it's going to try to keep me open through the winter. I've been, we started the restaurant with very small money, almost no money at all. And for a while, I felt that I had to cook for survival, just to cook something
what
that's
you're
going to
putting
sell.
on the menu.
Yes, like
something that maybe you're not 100% passionate about, but you could do it good and people would buy it.
Yeah, we had this. I remembered talking with Carmelo from Carmelo's, this conversation where he's been an amazing guide for the area.
I mean, he could tell you, like, if he just put like a meatball parm sub on his menu, like, he would sell 1 million of those, but he doesn't want to do that.
It was pretty funny the way we met, because he walked into the door and had the food, and at the end we were talking, and I sort of like had like my first real connection with any other chef that was important in the scene here through that. And it was almost like the Hollywood star who walked through my restaurant. That's how I felt.
No, he's in the top chefs of this area for sure.
And then he looked at me and he goes, listen, I gotta say something. Your menu looks really cool, but this is food that I would love to eat.
Yeah.
I suggest you probably try something different, bro. And I didn't get it at the time, like what he was saying. But we kept getting this like fish fry request every Friday.
Oh God.
And for a while, I was like, I'm not doing fish fries. To like, fuck, there's nobody on Fridays. Let's do a fish fry. and
as you're cursing,
as I was, yes. And then the running joke started, where people started saying to me that I couldn't do a good taco if I wanted to. So somebody who would ask for that fish fry, I will send them a taco, literally on me. And I was losing so much money, but I was saying to myself, it's going to work out at some point.
Yeah.
And we also started like mastering this whole plan with my sister and my mom about how do we get people to try things without them knowing. It is a
difficult thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So we said, we're just going to give it away. So as soon as they walked through the door, we gave you
like an amuse,
like an amuse bouche.
Yeah.
But we made it as Mexican as possible. And I remember my first one was beans, because everybody kept talking about the beans. And I was like, I'm going to serve you beans. So I did, and to my surprise, everybody loved them.
Yeah.
Like everybody went nuts about them. And we sort of like looked at each other. I'm like, these people are eating beans, like sort of like in a whispering tone, because they were pretty, like they were used to not eating that type of stuff,
Yeah.
And I remember it even more so when one of my servers said, hey, this guy would love to order a whole plate of what you just gave him.
Nice.
And I was like, no way, get out of here. Like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Then from then on, it sort of like got very serious. It got super serious to the point where I said to myself, I'm going to try to like give them the weirdest things that for me are the most familiar things.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now at this point. We finally, after many conversations where even Mr. Galarno, one night he went to this Tuesday fair that I was doing.
Yeah.
Had the food, and then he shook my shoulders and said, "Why there's not a lengua in the menu?" And I looked at him and said, "You know what? I don't think people are ready for it." And then he goes, "All right." He didn't say much about it.
Yeah.
But I could see that he was like pretty disappointed on the fact that I wasn't going full force forward with this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something you guys talked about last time in the podcast, where sometimes you just need somebody who's in the industry like you, Krista, or him to say to somebody, you know what, dude, just try it.
Yeah.
Just give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah.
So we did. And we put it out there, and it's working pretty well so
awesome.
far. So
that's great. I mean, I Krista and Andrew, I mean, off the mic and on, like, have both told me that, you know, you're doing some really exciting things up there. And I personally haven't been there yet, but
I know.
but I'm very much looking forward to doing it.
Me too, man. You
yeah.
know, I have to say they've been pretty nice and pretty amazing. I have met a ton of people just through like getting to know Krista.
Yeah, she'll
you know,
introduce you to people.
We sort of sign up for the whole like let's try to meet people gig.
Yeah.
This winter, really hardcore.
Tonight will be a good.
Yes. Because we are very far out there, you know.
Yeah.
It's a remote location, and sometimes it seems like we're the only people alive in the town. But there's an amazing amount of people out there, you know.
Yeah.
But we knew that we had to somehow, like, reach out a little further. And
that's the way to do it. I mean, like Carmelo even. I mean, I know you guys are a little past Lewiston, but even Lewiston, a lot of people think like that's a hike, and he, you know, tries to come into the city every now and then.
No, and the fun part with that is that I've sort of crashed Carmelo's kitchen a ton.
Nice.
I'm very well known for just popping by and dropping food, and just out of the fact that like sometimes we're very lonely in the restaurant, we sort of like close, and it's still pretty early, and I'm still very much going. We work 6 days, so
yeah.
The moment that you get a free moment, you're like, well, let's see if we can meet somebody tonight.
Yeah,
and that has been the good way. So.
That's an awesome mentality.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Victor, thank you so much for doing this, man, and coming down to the studio. I know I'm looking forward to trying your food, and I'm looking forward to seeing you compete in Nicholas Lee Chef in a couple months.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, you and
really,
JJ
really cool.
Richard from Torches and
that was another fun time. Yeah, I know. There's been many cool times. He's a really cool guy. I'm very impressed for everything that he's done with his restaurant. Like a guy who's got no limitations and no restrictions of saying, I believe in this shit and I'm going to do it. So
yeah, he's a very, very unique chef in the area.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, and this has been great meeting you and talking to you.
Nice. Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
All right.